LEGO Star Wars has changed and developed a lot over time, starting in 1999 and still going strong today. So in this video, I have divided the history of LEGO Star Wars into 4 separate eras, and I will explain my reasoning along with what defined them. The classic era of LEGO Star Wars was set between 1999 and 2004. This era of LEGO Star Wars was the very beginning, and to be honest, it was quite rough. Most things from this era looked pretty bad and have not aged well. The sets often looked very rough and kind of blocky, as well as they didn't have the same access to pieces and colors that they did today, so many sets would contain very blocky, out-of-place pieces or colors that they just didn't have in the correct color. The figures as well had very limited printing, most of the time only having face and front of the torso printing, although there were a few exceptions. As well as this, up until 2004, all the minifigures had the yellow LEGO skin color instead of the flesh tones that we have today. In contrast to these negatives, this era can be very nostalgic with this kind of vintage look. And among some of the rough sets, there were also a lot of gems. Something interesting I found in this era was some of the weird miscoloration. For example, the 2002 gunship contained metallic blue super battle droids, which are actually very sought after today. Along with that, in the early 2000s, LEGO released a batch of TIE fighters with black and blue instead of black and gray that we would know today as the correct color. I believe the reasoning for this is it was based off of some concept art where the TIE fighters look blue, and also you can interpret some of the TIE fighters as looking a little bit sand blue. But I thought this was kind of a weird artistic touch that can bring back a nostalgia for a lot of people. Along this time, LEGO was also suffering a lot financially and almost went bankrupt, which is interesting to take into consideration for this era. It's very interesting to see the beginnings of LEGO Star Wars and take a look back at its roots. Set between 2005 and 2014, this is what many people would call the golden age of LEGO Star Wars. And why I believe this is because of the innovation that we saw throughout this time period. This time showed a lot of great development and improvement for LEGO Star Wars as a whole. I think this can easily be shown throughout the years, as during this golden age of LEGO Star Wars, you were able to see rapid improvements on sets year after year. Another reason why I do think that this is regarded as the golden age of LEGO Star Wars is because this is around the time when Star Wars The Clone Wars, the TV show, was released, along with a lot of sets being based upon the prequels. I do think that a lot of the LEGO Star Wars fan base are young adults currently, and they did grow up with the prequels, and that's why they look back so fondly on this time, as many people, as myself, do really like the prequel sets. And with a large focus on the prequels and the Clone Wars during this time, as well as innovation, that's why this time period was so successful. I think the main reason for the success during this time was sets were improving, people liked what was coming out, and there were iconic sets, along just with improvement, good quality, accuracy, and playability. But now, before we continue on into what I think is one of the most interesting eras of LEGO Star Wars, in my opinion, these videos take a lot of time and effort to make. So if you would just quickly subscribe, that would mean a lot to me, and I am on the road to hitting 1,000 subscribers. I've framed the next era of LEGO Star Wars between 2015 and 2019, and I'm calling it the sequel era. The reasoning for this, hence its name, is pretty obvious. It's because this is the era when the sequel Star Wars movies came out. I think that this is a very underrated era of LEGO Star Wars because throughout this time period, sets have gotten very good and hold up very well today. Along with this, during the creation of the sequels, there were a lot of sets made off of them, and even though the sequels aren't fully liked today, at the time, these are some very good, high-quality sets in my opinion. As well as this, a little weird thing is that LEGO has this thing about just releasing things from concept art that haven't appeared in the movie, which I just thought was a little bit weird. And that's especially prevalent during this time because of the sequel movies. Additionally, tying into this area, I find it very interesting that during this time period when Disney acquired Star Wars, they released Star Wars Rebels, Rogue One, as well as the sequel movies, and because of this, we got a lot of LEGO Star Wars sets with the whole wave just based around one movie, which I know there are pros and cons to that, and there are also pros and cons to the mix of things that we get today. But at the time, I actually really liked this, and I would find it interesting if they brought this back. As well as all those things, the reason people don't look back as fondly on this is I believe most of the sets were based on the sequels, which people don't really look back on very fondly, as well as the fact that it was mainly sequel sets to begin with, and then also some just basic original trilogy sets, which many prequel fans did not really like. And as I said earlier in the video, I think the LEGO Star Wars community actually has a lot of prequel fans. Finally, one more thing I would like to mention about this era is that technically stud shooters were released in 2014, but this was a time of spring-loaded shooters and stud shooters, which a lot of people did not like. Anyway, this is the most underrated era of LEGO Star Wars in my opinion, with really solid builds, just unfortunate with the lineup of actual sets. Finally, we are moving into the final era, and I have deemed it the modern era for obvious reasons, and I have set it between 2020 and 2026 now. Starting off in 2020, there was obviously the COVID pandemic, which actually brought a lot of new fans into the community. Along with this, the modern age has developed and noticed its adult audience more, coming out with a lot of sub-themes of 18+ sets. Some examples are the Helmet series, the Starship collection, as well as dioramas, and obviously UCS. I think this era can be defined by its new builds, and I think they are very recognizable in their sort of style. I believe the modern builds of LEGO sets tend to be smaller and more compact, using a lot smaller pieces, causing them to be more detailed. That's why some people will deem it piece farming, or other terms similar to that, with having a lot smaller of pieces, therefore having the piece counts inflated of sets, leading them to be overpriced. But I actually think in some ways this is very good, as these smaller pieces actually create a lot more detail. But along with that, I also believe this era has allowed for a lot more overpriced LEGO sets. Finally, I just want to touch on controversies real quick, as I feel there have been a lot more controversies in recent years, or at least with more eyes on them. I think there were definitely controversies during the sequel era, but I think it's especially prevalent today, especially with Clone Troopers. But anyway, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, as these videos take a lot of work and I'm on the road to 1K. And if you want to learn about some modern Clone Trooper controversies like I was mentioning, click on this video on the end screen.